we continue the comment of the meaning of the Holy Quran by Abdullah Yusuf Ali with the introduction summary to Surah 71. This is another early Meccan surah, of which the date has no known significance. The theme is that, while good must uphold the standard of truth and righteousness, a stage is reached where it must definitely part company with evil, lest evil should spread its corruption. The story of Noah's agony is almost a parable for the Holy Prophet's persecution received in the Meccan period. And I think that some people that view my channel would pay particular attention to verse 23. وَقَالُوا لَا تَذَرُنَّ آلِهَتَكُمْ وَلَا تَذَرُنَّ وَدًّا وَلَا سُوَاعًا وَلَا يَغُوثَ وَيَعُوقَ وَنَسْرَ. And so Nasra, Ya'uk, Yaguth, Suwar, Wad, whatever other names the five are called. So the five chief false deities of different systems, which are either related to the 7 or 9 are a selection from them. So the introduction and summary of Surah 72, Al-Jinn. This is a late Meccan surah of which we can tolerably be certain of the date. It was 2 years before the Hijrah, when the Prophet, despised and rejected by his native city of Mecca, went to evangelize the lordly men of Ta'if. They maltreated him and nearly killed him. What caused him even greater pain was the maltreatment of the humble and lowly men who went with him. Tabari was handed down a memorable prayer of faith and humility, which he offered in the midst of his suffering. His hardship. Suffering is probably the wrong word. On his return journey to Mecca, a glorious vision was revealed to him. Hidden spiritual forces working for him, people not known to him accepting his message, while his own people were still rejecting him. Within 2 months, some strangers from Medina had privately met him and laid the foundations of that Hijrah, which was to change the fate of Arabia and the course of world history. So the chapter Noah and the chapter the fire beings, they relate. They both have 28 verses. Pretty good one to say in the evening, I would think. The introduction and summary to Surah 73, Al-Muzammil, the enfolded one. It has 20 verses. This is one of the earliest Suwar to have been revealed. The first was Surah 96, 8:1 through 5, Iqra, in the 40th year of the Prophet's life, say about 12 years before the Hijrah. Then there was an interruption, Fatra, of which the duration could not be exactly ascertained, as there was no external history connected with it. The usual estimate puts it about 6 months, but it may have been a year or two. The years were then counted by the lunar solar calendar. The second surah in chronological order was probably a great portion of Surah 68, Al-Qalam, which came after the Fatra was over. About the same time came this surah, say 3rd and 74, which follows, and the remainder of 96. When we roughly put the date of this surah about 11 to 10 years before the Hijrah. The subject matter is the significance of prayer, humility, and spiritual life, and the terrible fate of those who reject faith and revelation. And the introduction and summary to Surah 74, Al-Mudaththir, the one wrapped up, 56 verses. The surah dates from about the same time as the last one. Its subject matter is also similar: prayer and praise, and the need of patience in a period of great spiritual stress. The unjust who cause sorrow and suffering now will themselves experience agony in the hereafter. And introduction and summary to Surah 75, Al-Qiyamah. This surah belongs to the early Meccan period, but comes chronologically a good deal later than the last Suwar. Its subject matter is the resurrection, viewed from the point of the view of man, especially unregenerate man, as he is now, as he will be then, his inner and psychological history. And after the 40 verses of the Revelation, we arrive at the introduction and summary of Surah 76. Al-Insan, Al-Dahr. So Ad-Dahr is the time, and Al-Insan is the man. And we can relate the time, not in this context, I don't think, but but in other contexts, like certain narrations and the way that Zirvan is spoken of. But Allah is the one and only deity. So, all the stuff is not broken into different divinities. So the God over time is same God as other. The revelation of this surah was probably in the early Meccan period, with the possible exception of some verses, but its date has no particular significance. Its theme is the contrast between the two classes of men, those who choose good and those who choose evil, with special reference to the former. The title of the surah recalls an Arab idea which personified time as existing spontaneously from eternity to eternity and responsible for the misery or the happiness of mankind. In Surah 45:24, we already read, "They say nothing but time can destroy us." This attitude, of course, is wrong. Time is a created thing. It has its mysteries, but it is no more eternal than matter. It is also relative to our conception and not absolute, as Einstein has proved. It is only Allah who is self-subsisting, eternal, from the beginning and eternal to the end. The absolute existence, reality, we must not transfer his attributes to any figments of our imagination. The deification of time, Dahr, as against a living personal God, has given rise to the term Dahriya, as applied to an atheist or materialist. The whole of the surah, the 31 verses, is full of the highest symbolism, as it is generally the case with Meccan surahs, and this should always be remembered in their interpretation. Now, the qualities of God spoken of in terms of time, space, and matter, well, yeah, but the time, space, and matter application, that's not God. We just, know God through these occurrences. The lahut, as one would say, but so that's the quality, but the essence, the substance, or whatever you would want. Substance is the wrong word. We got to. Okay, well, I don't know how to articulate this because it's really, but okay, the introduction summary to Surah 77, Al-Mursalat, those sent forth. So these 50 verses, very interesting, dark tree of life with the way out sort of way of formulating this thing. But the surah belongs to an early Meccan period, somewhere near to Surah 75, Al-Qiyamah. The theme is somewhat similar. It denounces the horrors of the hereafter for those who rejected the truth. The refrain, "Ah, woe that day to the rejectors of truth," which occurs 10 times in its 50 verses, or an average of once every 5 verses, indicates the leitmotif. Okay, sorry about that, messed that up. So we're gonna see what verses those occur in differently elsewhere too. But so we have Surah 78, Al-Naba, the introduction and summary of these 40 verses. Let's remember, this starts the last, 30th of the Quran. This beautiful Meccan surah is not quite so early as the last, Surah 77, nor quite so late as Surah 76, but nearer in time to the latter. It sets forth Allah's loving care in a fine nature passage and deduces from it the promise of the future when evil will be destroyed and good will come to its own, and invites all who have the will to seek refuge with their Lord. And let us remember, in regards to this, that we are, referring to the better news, the more important news, the divine news, or the divine view of the news, you could say it. Let us not be distracted by the mere entertainment form of the news, or not really productive, but the introduction and summary to Surah 79, Al-Naziat, so those who tear out. This is also an early Meccan surah of about the same date as the last, and deals with the theme of judgment from the point of view of pride and its fall. The parable of Pharaoh occupies a central place in the argument, where he said, "I am your Lord Most High," and perished with his followers. And there's some mystic use of all of them, so that kind of. Surah 80 is problematic to some because of the difference of certain aspects. But so Abasa, he frowned. This is an early Meccan surah and connected with the incident which reflects the highest honor on the prophet's sincerity in the revelation that were vouchsafed to him, even if they seemed to reprove him for some natural and human zeal that led him to a false step in his mission according to his own high standards. Now, the few incidences mentioned as such in Sunni narrations, it's all Abu Bakr or Uthman, or I think one's Umar or something. It was not Muhammad, but somebody else that is being criticized here, but it's not criticism in the way of the they can't be trusted to convey the message or to live the message from then on, or something like that. So even if it is relating to Muhammad, it doesn't result in that problem. So this has 42 verses. He was once deeply and earnestly engaged in trying to explain the Holy Quran to Quraysh leaders when he was interrupted by a blind man, Abdullah ibn Maktoum, one who was also poor, so that no one took any notice of him. He wanted to learn the Quran. The Holy Prophet naturally disliked the interruption and showed him patience. Perhaps the poor man's feelings were hurt, but he whose gentle heart ever sympathized with the poor and the afflicted got new light from above, and without the least hesitation published this revelation, which forms part of the sacred scripture of Islam, as described in verses 13 and 16. The Prophet always afterwards held the man in high honor. The incident was only a passing incident, but after the explaining the eternal principles of revelation, the surah recapitulates the mercies of Allah to man and the consequences of a good or wicked life here, as seen in the spiritual world to come in the hereafter. And so we have us, our breaking point for this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.